Hello, welcome to Designing Beautiful and Engaging Slack Apps. I'm Paige Kehoe, a Senior Product Manager here at Slack. I'm going to be joined today by two other individuals from near and far. Wilhelm from Simple Poll is joining us from London to talk about his experience with BlockKit. Jamie, one of our tech leads, a senior front-end engineer at Slack, will be giving us a hands-on demo. As I mentioned, I'll go over a brief overview of BlockKit and where we've been and where we're going. Then Wilhelm will talk about his experience firsthand, and we'll pass it off to Jamie, who will do a hands-on demo. Before we hop into it, there are a couple things we need you to get ready so you can do the demo. First, sign in to a Slack workspace where you can install apps. If you don't have one, you can go to slack.com and create one now. It's free. You probably don't have the permission on your corporate workspace, so I'd recommend making a new one or a development workspace to do this. Next, you'll also need to create a Glitch account. Glitch is a free code hosting platform. It's a great spot to build small apps and remix other people's apps, which we'll be doing today with Jamie. If you don't have an account, go to glitch.com and create one now. Glitch supports account creation through connecting Gmail, GitHub, or Facebook accounts. Make one of those today so you can get started with Jamie as soon as we're ready for the demo. Now let's hop to it. You want to build quality apps that your users love. You probably don't want to spend too much time learning a lot of new technologies in that process. And you likely want your apps to look beautiful, have great user experience, probably almost out of the box, especially for those of you who, like me, aren't as design inclined. And that is why we built BlockKit. BlockKit is Slack's JSON-powered UI component library. It was designed to make app experiences with 4 key principles in mind. First, we want apps to feel like an extension of Slack. Your users should feel like they're interacting with a product that they already know and understand how to use. This will allow you to bring your tools and software to the fingertips of users. Next, we want app experiences powered by BlockKit to work seamlessly everywhere that Slack works, which means iOS, Android, web, the browser, or the desktop client. And this is why BlockKit works on all clients the same. And the next 2 parts are really crucial to BlockKit experiences. We want the components of BlockKit to work the same in all surfaces that apps can build. This means that you can interchange different pieces of this component library, stack them together to make the experience that you need, and it should feel and look the same everywhere that a user can interact with your app. Rome wasn't built in a day, neither was BlockKit. We launched BlockKit in 2019, which seems like forever ago, and that was BlockKit in Messages. The goal of this was to improve visual hierarchy and, of course, user experience. We started with a few core components that you see here. We focused on stackable bits of UI with components that developers and users alike already know and feel familiar with. After launch, we saw amazing adoption and a lot of your requests for so much more. So we started to build more. We expanded BlockKit with new blocks and more surfaces. We heard the need for a better way to collect user information, more dynamic experiences, and a focused surface for apps. So we launched modals. Modals are a great place for complex form experience, structured surveys, updatable, focused information display. That still wasn't enough for developers, and so we heard that you needed a persistent space where users can go to learn about what an app can do and actually interact with it. And that is App Home and the App Home tab. This is a space where we've seen amazing examples of complex capabilities like task management, calendars, menus, paginated information. and notification control, and so many other awesome things. To support that, we needed a few more UI components as well. So we added inputs and form capabilities to the BlockKit family, along with multi-selects, because why select one when you can select multiple? Last year, we buckled down on expanding our offering of blocks, and, as you'll hear later, enhancing the existing capabilities to be in line with the principles we mentioned before. We welcomed radio buttons, checkboxes, and headers to the BlockKit component library. We focused on giving your apps the components you are already accustomed to using without having to reinvent the wheel. And that brings us to our full offering of blocks today. We're excited to be expanding upon BlockKit since its initial launch. I'm happy to say that around 95% of apps in Slack's directory are powered almost exclusively on BlockKit. But you don't have to take my word for it. I'm going to pass it off to Wilhelm from Simple Poll to give you better insight into his team's experience firsthand building with BlockKit over the past year and a half.
Thank you so much, Paige. So excited to be here with all of you at Frontiers 2020. So yes, I'm Will. I'm the CEO and founder of Simple Poll, and I can't wait to share our experience building on top of BlockKit with you today. So there's a couple of things I'd love to cover. So first off, I'll talk a little bit about what Simple Poll is and what we do, and kind of how we use BlockKit. And then I'll dive into a few things that we've learned in terms of using BlockKit and some tips that we have for you that might not necessarily be as obvious. And then I'll close out with sort of our look ahead and our wish list and what we'd like to see from BlockKit in the future. All right, so first up, what is Simple Poll? So Simple Poll helps teams make decisions and stay connected. So we bring very simple native polling right into Slack, right into the channels where you might already be communicating with your team. So you can kind of see on the screenshot right here, it's a poll. Everyone who's a member of the channel can vote on the different options of the poll. Simple Poll is fundamentally powered by BlockKit. So really BlockKit makes Simple Poll work. And we've been building on top of the Slack platform since sort of late 2015. So we've really seen BlockKit come a long way, and yeah, couldn't be more excited to be part of this journey. And yeah, needless to say, we're big fans of BlockKit. So first up, we have the power of modals, and specifically using overflow menus and modals to bring private dynamic content to channels. So why would you care about bringing private dynamic content to channels? Well, message content is always visible to everyone in the channel. So once a message is posted, the content of that message is visible to everyone who's a member of that channel. And if you want to change it, you kind of have to update the message, which can be a little bit cumbersome. Modals don't really have that problem. So by bringing modals close to channels, we can kind of take on all of the benefits of modals. And I'll show you exactly what I mean by that, by kind of taking the screenshot I had earlier as an example. So you might have noticed that at the top there was this overflow menu. That's sort of just a part of BlockKit. And within that, we have a few options, most notably view info, which is the top option. Clicking on that ends up opening a modal, which looks like this. And within a modal, we can kind of, as the user clicked on that button, automatically dynamically generate really the content that we want the user to see. So we can vary the content based on the user that opened it, which means that the content can be private, it can be dynamic, can be specific to the user, and we can provide it just in time. So you could imagine an anonymous poll where we can't really show to all of the channel what everyone voted for, because that would kind of not make it anonymous. So as an individual user who would want to check in on what you actually voted for, you could then open this modal via that overflow menu and get a sort of a summary of what the options that you voted for actually were. And that way we can bring private content that's specific to a user close to a channel with the help of modals. All right, next up, we have App Home as a creation service, and offering a better user experience by using App Home over modals for these more complex setup flows. And what's the problem we're trying to solve here by kind of finding the right creation service for a setup flow? Well, fundamentally, we want our users to be very comfortable and familiar with the experience that they're offering. And I'm going to make the case here for why we think App Home is a great creation surface and a great sort of tool for that kind of job. All right, so you can kind of see a screenshot here of what it looks like to create a survey with Simple Poll in App Home. Fundamentally, creating a survey is a little bit of a more complex setup flow. You can create multiple different questions. You can select your audience. There's a lot more things to set up. So originally we had this flow within a modal, but then we quickly decided to use App Home instead. And as Paige already mentioned, App Home is great for private, persistent content. And in this complex setup flow, a user can gradually build up their survey without really being stuck in a modal. So it's much less scary, more familiar, maybe more familiar kind of like a web page, and fundamentally more pleasant than what you could do without App Home. Some of the other benefits are that you just have a lot more space for content. Users can very easily leave and then resume later, whereas in a modal, you'd kind of have to abort, cancel, and then start over later. You have a lot of opportunities to show previews here as well. So really helping users understand what they're about to do, what the consequences of their actions are, which is all just much harder to do in a modal. And then also, you're not really bound by the rules of only having sort of 3 push layers that you have in a modal. So you have a lot more control over the UI, and you can just really do a lot more. So we found that complexity, state, previews just all work better in App Home, and setup flows benefit from all of those: complexity, state, previews. So of course, there's some contexts where modals are sort of a simpler choice and the right tool for the job, but for these more complex setup flows, App Home really is quite good. So just to go a little bit into the details of how our setup flow works. So we have these overflow menus within App Home where in this case, you could kind of edit or remove a survey question. And editing would open a modal where you could then, via the help of input blocks, make sort of adjustments there. So fundamentally, we kind of still use modals within our App Home setup flow, but just the core returning point that and the core experience that it's all built on top of is really App Home. Now, another example of that is the survey audience. So again, user would kind of click a button within App Home, select using the multi-select block that we're also a big fan of, the users that should receive the survey, and then they submit the modal and return to App Home. And then App Home shows a preview of, this is how many users will receive your survey. All right, and with that, I'd love to cover some of the other tips and tricks. With the first 2, we're actually staying within App Home. And the very first one is pagination in App Home. So each page within App Home can only have 100 blocks. So as soon as you have more content that you'd like to display in App Home, you will need to do some kind of pagination. And the screenshot you can see on the slide here is the UI pattern that we found works well for that. So a previous page button, a next page button, and then the static select menu in the middle that lets users jump right to a specific page. Next up, making it easy for users to get to App Home. So App Home is still a fairly recent addition to the platform, less than a year old. So we've tried in a bunch of different ways to just make it really, really simple and easy for users to get to App Home from different parts of the Simple Poll app. So one thing we do is within the View Info modal that I showed earlier, there's a button in there that lets users jump right to App Home. So if you ever see a poll with Simple Poll, it's just 2 clicks and you can go right to App Home, even if you've never opened it before. And similarly, if you type /poll and hit enter, you'll also see a button there to go to App Home. Next up, over-communicate. So there's new users starting to use Slack every single day. And this whole app interactivity thing is actually still quite new for a lot of users. So it's really helpful to just always over-communicate. What does the app do? What are its capabilities? What are the consequences of any action that you might present to the user? We found that over-communication pays off. And then finally, test your app on mobile. So there can be subtle differences across mobile and desktop, and your users will definitely be using your app on mobile. So make sure to test on both just to make sure that everything is exactly as you expect. All right, and then finally, looking ahead to the future. So as you can imagine, there are many things on our Blockit wish list, but there's two that I'd love to talk about today that are really relevant to what I've been saying so far. So first up is input blocks in App Home. Input blocks within App Home would help us offer an even better survey creation experience, where you could edit a question right within the App Home surface area, and you wouldn't have to kind of jump into a modal and then jump back out. So that would mean an even smoother, even more familiar experience to users. And then secondly, receiving block action events as the user is typing within an input block. This would allow us to offer an experience where a user could search through all of their draft or even sent out surveys and could find them really easily without needing to make use of navigation. Awesome. And that's a wrap on my section. We're very excited for the future of Blockit. And with that, I'll hand it back to Paige.
Thanks, Wilhelm. We've heard from teams like Simple Poll about the need for better state management, event notification, powerful search experiences, and a couple exciting things that we can talk about today. We are releasing inputs in App Home. So Wilhelm, you can have your survey experiences in App Home, and radios and checkboxes and messages. We also know that we should expand to embrace our principles of Blockit, which is consistency and flexibility. So we're going to be emitting the full state in blocks actions calls, as well as from inputs. Inputs are also moving into messages. So if you wanted a quick edit in messages, you could do that as well. Coming soon are inputs and messages, as well as full state in blocks actions. You don't have to believe me because you can actually see it today. Jamie's going to be walking us through an exciting demo where we're building on these features right now.
Thanks, Paige. My name is Jamie, and I'm a front-end engineer on the Blockit team. I'm excited to walk you through building a Slack app in this build along. Will, I'm excited for you too, because we're going to address everything on your wish list and more. I have the code for the app ready. It's my very low budget recreation of Simple Poll. I'm going to get everybody here set up with the new app, and along the way, I'll highlight some of our releases. When we're done, you'll have your own working Slack app that demos all the newest Blockit functionality. First, we're going to create a new app by remixing some glitch code and creating an app on Slack's config page. Then we'll configure a slash command that's already written for you. Next, we'll install our app, which will give us the credentials we'll need to connect our app to Glitch. We'll test the connection with our slash command, which will also show off checkboxes and radio buttons in messages. Then we'll use the Blockit builder to help us recreate an input block that dispatches actions. Finally, we'll use that input block to build an app home that supports type-ahead search. Let's get started. Since most of you have probably built an app before, we don't need to start from the beginning. Glitch is an in-browser code editor that can build and host your app. I already have an app started in Glitch that you can remix. Remixing in Glitch is like forking in GitHub. It'll create a copy of the code for you to work with. Go to glitch.com/tilde/slack-frontiers-2020. You can also search for Slack-Frontiers-2020 on glitch.com to find it. Look for a button in the bottom right that says Remix Your Own, or click Edit or View Source, and then use the pictured dropdown and select Remix. Once you've done this, you'll have your own version of our code to work with. Our Glitch project is using Bolt for JavaScript, a Node.js package maintained by Slack that helps you build Slack apps quickly. We're going to be using Bolt for JavaScript, but Bolt is also available in Python and Java. This is what you should see after remixing. The name of your new project is in the top left. Let's open the logs for our app. Click the Tools dropdown in the bottom left, and then click Logs. You should see Bolt app is running. Underneath that, you should see your URL, followed by a URL. The one pictured here is for the app that I built. You'll see a different URL based on the name of your new project. You will see it end with /slack/events. This is the URL we will use for all of our configuration, so keep it handy. Anytime I say paste in your Glitch app project URL, this is the one that I'm talking about. Now we'll walk through how to set up the app, but everything we're going to do is also covered in the README. Any link that's in the slides will be in here as well. Use that if you get lost or to see what's coming up. Let's make a new app in Slack to experiment with. Go to api.slack.com/apps. You'll see a big Create an App button if you don't have any apps. If you do, you'll see a green Create New App in the top right. Click the one you see to create a new app. Give it a name and choose the team you'll want to install it on. Then you'll land on your new Slack apps config page. Keep this page handy with the Glitch app page. We will need both. Let's pause here. At this point, you should have your own copy of the Glitch app. You can remix the app at glitch.com/slack-frontiers-2020. You should have your Glitch project URL handy. This is in the logs of your new Glitch app. And you should have a new app in Slack assigned to a team. You can create an app at api.slack.com/apps. We're going to pause here just for a couple seconds to make sure that everybody is following along. If you are having any trouble or any questions, feel free to message us in the chat. All right, let's get started again. In your new Slack apps config page, add a slash command by clicking slash command on the left. Enter /new-poll as the name of the command. It's important to use new-poll exactly if we want it to hook into what we've already built in the app. Copy and paste your Glitch project URL into the request URL field. Remember, look in the logs for your Glitch app. You'll see the URL printed there. You might see some not authed errors in your Glitch app. Don't worry about those. We're going to get rid of them soon. A description is required here, so add anything you'd like and then click Save. Click OAuth and Permissions tab on the left-hand side. Scroll down and look for a Scopes section and expand the bot token scopes. You probably already see the commands scope there. Add the chat::write.public scope as well. This will give us permission to post messages. We need this because our app responds to the slash command with a message. Chat::write.public will automatically also add chat::write. Those two plus the command scope are the three scopes your app should have. On the left-hand side, click on Interactivity and Shortcuts. Turn on Interactivity with the toggle, then add your Glitch project URL as the app's interactivity URL. This is where all your dispatch actions will go. Remember, it's your project's URL plus /slack/events and to look in the logs of your Glitch app to find it as well. Click Save Changes when you're done. Don't forget, all of these steps are also in the app README if we're moving too fast. Let's pause here. At this point, you should have a new slash command to /new-poll that posts to your Glitch app URL. You should have 3 scopes listed under bot scopes in the OAuth and Permissions tab. And your Slack's interactivity URL should be configured to send payloads to your Glitch app. We'll pause here for another few seconds. If you're having trouble with anything, please ask questions in the chat. Now we're going to install the app so that we can get our credentials for authorization. Click Install App on the left-hand side and follow the flow. Let's connect our Glitch app code to the Slack apps config. We're going to need two things, the signing secret and the OAuth token. After installing, you'll probably get dropped on a page with your bot OAuth token present. If you get lost, you can also find it on the OAuth and Permissions tab. Grab your bot user's OAuth access token and copy-paste it into the glitchapps.env file. To get the signing secret, we're going to click Basic Information back in your Slack apps config page. In your Glitch app, select the .env file. Copy over the signing secret from your config into the .env file. We're going to pause here again for a few seconds. At this point, you should have the app installed on your team and your app's signing secret and bot OAuth token stored in your glitchprojects.env file. Again, please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Now your app should be ready to authenticate with Slack's API. Let's test this with a / command. Go to the team that you installed your app on and type /new-poll. See the app respond with a poll about pizza. Notice that these are checkboxes and radio buttons. Previously, these were only available in App Home and Modals. Now they're available in Messages too. App Home and Modals are single-player surfaces, meaning that only one user can interact with the content at a time. Messages open up the possibility of a multiplayer surface, since messages appear in channels where many users are present. They are collaborative in nature. With checkboxes and radio buttons in this new collaborative surface, you could imagine some really cool use cases here. For example, a release checklist that any team member can check items off of. Go ahead and check a checkbox or click a radio button. Our app takes the payload it gets and then posts it right back to you as a message in your DM so that you can inspect it. Open the app DM to see the payload. You can use this to see the recent changes that we've made to our actions payloads. Here's a closer look at the changes from our API changelog for those action payloads. When users click a button or make a selection or perform any other action on an interactive BlockKit element, your app receives a payload describing that action. Previously, the actions key was used to tell the developers the new state of the exact element the user changed and nothing else. Now, notice a new state key here. This is what we've released recently. It has the state of all the other stateful elements in the blocks array, not just the one the user took an action on. If you've worked with BlockKit modals, the state key will look familiar. For submitting views, the state key represents the values of stateful elements in input blocks. But we're improving that payload as well. Here's an image from our changelog representing the change to our views submit payload. Previously, the state key only reported on elements that were inside of input blocks. But now, just like the previous payload, the views submit payload will have the state of any stateful element, regardless of block type. This is a payload for a modal with two blocks, an input block and a section block. The state key previously would have only had the input block, but now it has the section block as well. With these improvements, now Slack can be your source of truth, rather than needing to store and keep track of this information yourself. Let's explore some other cool new things that we've released recently. Navigate back to your Slack apps config page. Let's set up App Home and experiment with input blocks dispatching actions. Go to the app config page and click on Event Subscriptions. Your event subscription URL will be your glitch project's URL. You can find this in the logs. Listening for events is already taken care of by Bolt. Try putting the glitch project URL in the event subscription URL input field, and you'll see Slack validate the endpoint with a challenge payload. Open up the Subscribe to Bot Events section and subscribe to App Home Opened Events. Don't forget to click Save. We also need to turn on the App Home tab. Click App Home on the left and scroll down to the Show Tabs section. Switch on the toggle for Home tab. Then reinstall your app. Anytime we need to add new permissions or scopes, we need to reinstall the app. Click Install App on the left and go through the flow again. Go to Slack and open your new app home. Click the DM with your app and then the Home tab. You should see Welcome to App Home. Let's pause here again. At this point, you should have your Glitch Projects URL as your Slack app events subscription URL. You should be subscribed to App Home Opened Events, and you should see Welcome to App Home showing in your app's home. Now let's build a new input block that dispatches actions to put in our app home. The block is already in your glitch app, commented out in app-home-blocks.js. You can simply uncomment the block in order for it to appear in app home. So don't stress about copying the payload we'll write together exactly. The Block Kit Builder is a WYSIWYG tool that helps us construct payloads by providing sample blocks and giving us a preview of what they'll look like. I'm going to use it here to show you the new parts of the input block. You're welcome to build along, but don't forget that the block is already available in app-home-blocks.js in your glitch app. Will's Simple Poll app lets you paginate through your past polls, but what if you could search for them as well? Let's change the label on our input block to be something more descriptive, like search for a poll. Here's where we get to use some of the cool new things that we've released recently. Previously, input blocks weren't allowed in App Home. They were only supported in modals. This was because input blocks relied on modal submission to communicate their state. Now, input blocks can dispatch actions, just like any other interactive block. This opens the door to supporting them in other places. We're going to use an input block with a plain text input element that dispatches actions on characters entered to build our type ahead search. To make our input block dispatch actions, we need to add the dispatch action flag to the input block and set it to true. With that flag present on the input block, our plain text input element will now dispatch actions. The default for that element is to dispatch an action on enter pressed, but let's customize this to be on character entered instead. It helps with the interactive type ahead experience. We do this by adding a dispatch action config to the element. Let's add an action ID so we can identify the actions in our Bolt app. And finally, let's add a block ID. Registering consistent block IDs and action IDs help preserve user input even through updates, which will be important when we update the app home with our search results. Here's a closer look at that payload. Remember, this is also already in your glitch app. You can uncomment the block now, and we'll check it out in our app home. Let's test it out. Go back to the workspace where your app is installed. Click on the app DM and then click Home. If you're already on the Home tab, click on the Messages and the Home tab again to re-trigger the App Home Opened event and get the updated payload if necessary. Type something into the input. Because we're dispatching on character entered, you'll see a spinner on the right. Back in your glitch app, we have a handler already set up that is logging what you type. If this is working, you should see what you typed logged out in your logs. We'll pause for a few seconds here. At this point, you should have an input block appearing in your app home. And when you type in that block, you should see it logged out in your Glitch app. Back in your Glitch app, go to the index.js file. Find where we handle the app action search_poll. See a comment instructing you to uncomment out the last line to complete the search functionality. Go ahead and uncomment the call to publish search blocks on line 59. Back in your app home, let's search for the word chocolate. Now you should start to see results. With input blocks dispatching actions, you can now receive typed input from users as they're typing and respond. To recap, we've set up a new app with a / command using checkboxes and radio buttons in messages, a new surface for those two elements. Then we checked off some things to see the addition to the blocks actions payload, a state key that has the state of any stateful element in the blocks array. We learned that Vue's submit payload now has all stateful elements in its state payload as well. We set up app home with an input block that dispatches actions on characters entered. Then we use those new actions to build a type ahead search experience. It's been a busy 2020 for BlockKit, but we're not done yet. Let's go back to Paige to hear more about what's coming next.
Thanks, Jamie. She's right. The fun doesn't end here. I hope you are as excited as I am to not only have a bunch of new capabilities in BlockKit, but also to have just gone through building with some of them already. As we mentioned, coming soon is inputs and messages. We've really embraced the BlockKit principles of flexibility and consistency to enable you to build the best app experiences possible. Other things you can do to get started with BlockKit and building Slack apps are checking out our API site, prototyping in the BlockKit builder, and getting started with our tutorials. We have really verbose documentation that covers everything we've discussed today and a whole lot more. You also can get more familiar with our schema by using the BlockKit builder to prototype. And lastly, the tutorials are a great way to follow along with hands-on demos like we did today. And you can take it one step further by joining our platform developer beta program. You can be the first to try out new things that we're developing on our platform. This program will allow people like you to test out features that we're hoping to release and give us feedback. We know we wouldn't be where we are today without lots of feedback from you, and so we need more. Please join the beta program at the link below. I'm sad to say that brings us to the conclusion of our time today. I hope you learned a lot about what's coming next with BlockKit, learned how to leverage those new features, and of course, how to design beautiful and engaging Slack apps. I really appreciate all of you in our developer community spending time with us virtually as best as we can. And thanks so much for joining us. I'm Paige Kehoe. Have a great day.